Drive.
All right. What is up, theology nerds? This is Trip, and I'm here with the man who just got back from fishing, the
Yes,
Bo
I
Daddy.
did. Yeah,
know.
baby. Tight lines. That's what we say. It's
Oh.
like our blessing.
It's your blessing. Wow.
Like if you're headed upstream and I'm headed downstream, and I say tight lines, brother.
Yeah. Well, yesterday I was talking to Brian McLaren, and he's off to go fly fishing. I was like, so I don't. This is 3 friends in a row, though you don't know the other one, who've all been in sequential fly fishing trips.
Yeah.
So
tis the season. Yeah, it is that time of year.
And we're joined today. Return guest is Kevin Carnahan.
Hey,
what's up, Kevin?
Hey, how's it going?
Welcome back. Hey, Kevin, I listened to your essay from Substack, and I just want to say I had 2 thoughts running in my head simultaneously. One from my Scottish friend, who I think would say to you, "What have you done?" And then from my mother, who would say, "Well, I hope you're proud of yourself."
Neither of them sound incredibly positive for some reason.
Well, for those that don't know, Kevin Carnahan is a theological ethicist, and is part of a little series Diana Bass and I are doing on thinking about the anniversary of the country. And well, Kevin sent in a little lecture just like everyone else did, and the idea was do something around 30 minutes so that people could watch it and then discuss it in groups, because so many clergy have been saying, what are we going to do? Church is going to start back, the fall season, and if your church is all magnified, they've got all sorts of things ready. What are we going to do? And then Kevin was like, oh, I'll help. And I would like to use this opportunity to let you know that America has never been good.
It's never been good. Just burn the whole thing down. Just
wow. Hey, 2 things before we get started. We were talking soccer just before we launched here. If anyone has never read the book How Soccer Explains the World by Franklin Fiore, I think is how you say his name. It is a wonderful introduction to the world's game. But I just looked up the AI summary of it, and I just want to give you the 4 themes that AI says are in the book, because I think it's a pretty good segue to what we're going to be talking about. So the first one is tribalism over harmony. The second one is political ideology. The third one is corruption. And the fourth one is social movements. Soccer is not just a game. It's a way for oppressed people to fight back. So those are the 4 themes of the book, How Soccer Explains the World. And I thought that was pretty fitting this morning.
Yeah, no, and you see all of that in the World Cup right now, right? I mean, my goodness. I don't know if they all have been following along, but like the United States actually started out with a inspiring run out of the beginning. And then there was a red card against probably our best player. And then which the United States, what are the strengths in soccer is playing from the underdog position, where you're like, we can defeat these guys, right? And the United States, since we usually suck, we often play from that underdog position and with that energy. But after that red card, Donald Trump put in a call to the president of FIFA and was like, you take our guy off that red card. And since FIFA's corrupt, they were like, oh yeah, sure. Even though they don't do that. And so they let him off the red card, which it immediately meant, even though the team we're playing against was like way better than us, they got to fight with that like underdog, like, oh my God, we're fighting against corruption energy. And they totally just ripped apart the United States in the next game. which yeah. So there you go, corruption and the fight of the oppressed against, it's all over the place.
Wild. By the way, this is a sports podcast now.
Okay, yeah.
We've figured out that if
we're going into the Lakers offseason moves next.
That's what I was gonna say. We've got enough Lakers talk in the last couple episodes that we've become a sports broadcast.
But didn't FIFA give him the Peace Prize?
Yep.
Yes.
Well,
yeah.
And maybe he got, like, you get a Peace Prize and you get one little, like, gimme.
Yeah.
You know, you're you're a peacemaker, so
except for the Peace Prize was a gimme from the beginning, so it wasn't like that was merited and then there should be something in addition. No, this is the thing, is like FIFA is one of the most corrupt, like, sports organizations in the world. There's no doubt. And so there is an extent to which, Donald Trump is just like, oh no, I know how this works. I can understand this. This is I can use this system. Yeah.
Hey, the other thing I wanted to mention to you two is that I'm feeling a little unsettled this morning. And so this church that I'm serving right now is a big downtown church. It's essentially like a city block equivalent. 3 stories. It looks like a giant castle. It's this impressive building. But and there are 6 entrances. The chicken has made its appearance behind Trip. Oh boy.
Yeah, Raven heard Bo's voice and just came running.
So anyway, we have a motion detector security system that I love because it'll let me know if somebody's in the building. And so, like, I'll go, oh, I didn't know that group was here today. And I'll go down and say hi to them. And it has allowed me pastorally to, like, connect with people who are, like, downstairs on the other side of the building. And I wouldn't hear them otherwise. And it's just great. And sometimes, a stranger will walk in and I'll say, hey, how can we help you? And they'll say, I'm just looking for food. I'll say, oh, here, let's go to the pantry, whatever it is. I love this system. But once in a while, like this morning, I see an odd timestamp. So I'm like, oh, I wonder what that is. And I click on it. And yesterday there was somebody in military fatigues, like black tactical gear, wandering through the building, and they had shades on the entire time, and they just were wandering around. I don't know if they were casing the place. I don't know if they were looking for me. I don't know what it was, but I'm a little unsettled this morning. So if at any point I need to step off the broadcast, just know it's because I'm not sure what the hell that was.
And if we see something other than a chicken in your background, though,
exactly, yeah,
we'll let you know.
See this little window here? If a face mysteriously appears in this window, I'll have to step away real quick. It's unnerving, is what it is.
Yeah. Oh,
it was like he was cosplaying SWAT team or something, but he had his shades on the whole time, so he wasn't really scanning for anything. It was weird.
That qualifies as weird.
Yep. Hashtag
among
not
other
cool.
Things.
Yeah.
Among other things. Yeah. Ooh. So, Bo.
Yes.
I sent you Kevin's lecture.
Yeah,
thing.
you did.
I want to know what went through your head, because I was watching all of them, obviously, and I thought, ooh, if Kevin can join, this should be fun. I think Bo's going to have thoughts on this. This was one of these times I'm just like, I want to see what happens if Bo and Kevin start talking.
I did have 2 big thoughts the entire time, and I've been waiting to pick Kevin's brain here. So the first one is this. In 2008, I went to seminary, and my first evening class was American history with Randy Woodley, who's a Native American scholar. And he has a very different perspective on American history pre-1491. And so for those who don't know, 1492, Columbus sails the ocean blue. But America existed before that. Well, the land was here. Yeah. So in that class, it was like a whiplash of him introducing us to the fact that this pristine, glorified, sanitized, all beautiful light and God's blessing on this country from day one was a cleaned up version, and that what had been swept under the rug was as important a testimony as what normally gets portrayed as the founding of this country. So as I listened to your walk through history, and specifically, and I'm fascinated, by the way, with the early 20th century, because when I was an evangelical pastor, one of the things we subscribe to this thing called redigging the wells. And you go back in history and you find where God has moved, but that, through rock and debris and history and, institutional stuff, that sort of slowly got choked out. And you go and you, through prayer and service, you redig the wells of where God has moved in the past in the hopes that springs up again. But what it introduced, I know it's a weird way to do history, but what it introduced me to was the early 1900s were an incredible time in this country. So especially pre-World War I, pre-Great Depression, so much of our media, it was just a fascinating time. So I really enjoyed your walk through history, but specifically the part where you focused on 100 years ago, because I kind of got in the habit of saying, what happened 100 years ago this year? So I started it in 2006. Well, it turns out 1906 was just a treasure trove of interesting things that had happened. And anyway, I've continued doing that. So that was one thing. And the other thing is more biblical, but I wanted to ask you, as a philosopher and an ethicist, where does your interest in history also come from? Because I was impressed with your breadth of knowledge and ability to integrate that stuff into your main thesis. Yeah. So where's the interest in history come from?
So, I, as some might know, I am a theological ethicist, and particularly focused on Reinhold Niebuhr, who was 20th century Christian ethicist in the United States. And he draws from a tradition that goes back to Max Weber and Ernst Troeltsch. And those two guys are like sociological historians of religion. Weber wouldn't consider himself a theologian, but Troeltsch would. But what both of them are doing, and what Niebuhr ends up picking up on, is that they're trying to draw on the history of Christianity and the history of society and pull out what are the social movements, the ideas that are influencing things. So Weber's famous one is the development of capitalism out of Christianity, right? Probably his most famous thesis is that what happens. So what happens is that we get the Calvinists who come along and develop this idea that, they're really concerned about their salvation, but they can't know whether they're saved. And so they start looking for hints that they're saved. And they start looking for the blessings of God that might come in the form of wealth, right? And so this gives them, as Weber says, a kind of internal motivation then to seek after wealth, even though that's not the way they think of it. They think, oh, this is a sign that God is like approving of me, right? But it gives them a way to seek out wealth. But also, being Calvinist, they don't want to be out spending their wealth, because that would be sinful to go out and do that. And so they end up pursuing wealth and then saving it up. And this, as Weber says, is one of the bases for the development of modern capitalism, is this kind of out of a theological understanding of the world, a theological worldview, you get this development. And so so that's the kind of thing that those guys were doing, is analyzing history and theology to try and figure out, how does this interact with what's actually happening in society? And Niebuhr then picks up on that. So what he does, and I mentioned this a little bit in the lecture, is like with as you're heading into World War II, right? He's analyzing the fact that the United States thinks it's so great and so wonderful for everything it's done. It has participated in the war to end all wars, and oh, we're going to be moving beyond this. And it thinks, but actually in the process, he's like, you know what you've actually done is you saddled Germany with a massive debt from World War I, and you're when you think that you're the most innocent, when you think you're the greatest, is probably when you've screwed something up. And so he goes back and he analyzes that and says, look, this is the evil is in part caused by us. Now we're going to again go into World War II and pretend that we're all great, because we're going to try and solve this German problem. But he says, but Americans will always forget, you caused the German problem. Like that's you're part of the cause of this that's going on. And so it's a part of that tradition that I'm a part of. And I think I go back to it every time that I go back to kind of Niebuhr and that tradition of social ethics. I end up a lot today arguing like online about Bible stuff and how to read the Bible and all that, which takes me out of it. But every once in a while, I'm able to go back and be like, oh yeah, I remember I was a social analyst. I do like, this is actually what I'm most trained to do, is contemporary social analysis and how that relates to theological ideas and how that plays out in society.
That is fascinating. 2 touch points. In that same 2008 semester that I started seminary, in church history, I was introduced to this idea that you talked about with the early Calvinists in this country, and how they developed this thing called signs of divine benevolence, which is just a great thing to drop at a barbecue or a cocktail hour. Signs of
I want to go to a barbecue with you at some point.
Yeah. Oh, I'm a hoot. Yeah. If I get a couple ales in me and I start dropping things like the fallacy of misplaced concreteness and signs of divine benevolence, people just they like moths to a light.
Yeah, flock. I can see that. I can see it happening.
I end up standing alone at a lot of barbecues and cocktail parties. Hey, where are you guys going? Where's everybody going? Anyway, this signs of divine benevolence is so fascinating, because ultimately you can't know if you're elect.
Right.
Wink, there will be signs. Yeah. And one of the signs of God's favor is economic prosperity. Yep. And so it is just the most interesting, and if you track it and it becomes the Protestant work ethic, I mean, it is so fascinating how that stuff ideologically gets integrated in the DNA, but then it disappears, and people just think it's natural law. They think it's just obvious, like, look, that person's doing really well, or that church is really growing. Obviously, God is blessing it. You're like, where did that come from?
Right. And it seems such a strange idea, given the history of Christianity, where like wealth was suspect, right? I mean, like there was a time when I think Charles Matthews had an editorial that he did for the New York Times, and it was like about why Christianity is not pro-wealth, right? But you have to explain that to Americans, because they don't even understand that anymore, because we are so influenced by that late development out of the Reformation that it's like, hold on. Guess what? Christians historically were highly suspicious of wealthy people because that probably meant that they had done something that wasn't, acceptable in order to get that wealth. And Jesus has the whole thing about like, hey, it's tough to, you might not get into heaven if you have wealth, right? But somehow that becomes through this, like, oh no, it's a sign of your salvation. It's like, what? How the frick did we get there?
Yeah.
And it's just, that's fascinating to me how the it spins off into its own little thing.
And Sean Hannity, he would blow a gasket, if he heard something like this, because in his little mantras that he does, it's the greatest country in the greatest time of history, right? In God's green earth, and it just shows up in interesting ways. Side note, talking about genealogy trip, in 1896, so just over 100 years ago, the phrase "pull yourself up by your bootstraps" was a synonym for impossible. It meant impossible. People would say it's like pulling yourself up by your bootstraps. And over 100-year period, it morphed and migrated to be an assignment and sort of a pejorative of people who weren't pulling themselves up by their bootstraps.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
In a 100
I'll just
years,
say for Calvin's sake, he thought it was sus that you would charge much interest whatsoever to people.
Oh yeah.
Or that you would gain wealth at the expense of someone that needed capital investment to have a life-giving, supportive job for their family. Like my family were half of them are primitive Baptists, like, so you don't really know if you're among the elect. And so
right.
Like, what was your phrase, Bo? You had a different phrase.
Signs of divine benevolence.
Yeah. I don't know if I heard that's that phrase, but occasionally God would give testimony, in your life to your election, signs of your election.
That's what this is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Amazing.
Okay, can I ask Kevin a question on your first topic before you go to your Bible thing?
Oh, before I get to the Bible, I also have a Methodist thing for him, but you go.
All right. So here's this is about the way he's weaving the kind of social history in. So there's a number of forces. On my Post-it, I wrote 6. And in case people haven't watched it, I didn't even think we probably should have.
Yeah, we should probably say something about what we're actually talking about.
Yeah, then let me ask you the question to give the thesis. Then I'll ask my follow-up. So the part of what you're doing in the essay is asking, was America good? And we tend to, and this is the world I inherited and why it struck me so much, right? And I put this in the Substack post that I texted Kevin. I was like, this is so good. It's like a perfect connection with my experience. Like, I was born into a family, it's half clergy, half military. You got God, you got America. We're like the good team. And even in our family, you had like the military ones, doctors, teachers, and half of them are Anabaptist style Baptists, nonviolent, and their religious freedoms being protected by the ones in the military, because it's part of the democratic experiment to have a pluralism of faith in here and integrity. Like, we're gonna everyone in the military should get to have their own faith, and that's one of the gifts of clergy in the military. Anyway, like, it's a very different picture, right?
Yeah.
And when you're a good American and a good worker and a good Christian, like, you aren't like, those aren't 3 different demands, and they're probably all going to happen because you're a really good family person. You're an excellent member of your family and a citizen. And it was, for me, so much of that just hit the fan after 9/11, where the church is just embarrassing. We're like the ones that are most Islamophobic, nationalistic, militaristic. People buy some crazy lies. They can't even differentiate different branches of Islam into who we go attack. Like, you start going through it, that I'm like, what is this? And I remember feeling like deeply betrayed, and that, like, my identity as a Christian and as an American and all these kinds of things. I thought we were the good guys. And now we're acting like we are while doing nothing approximating good.
Yeah.
And so much of what was normative to my parents and grandparents is the kind of collision of accidental forces where we end up giving ourselves credit for being the good guys. And that becomes part of our cherished self-image as a nation that Kevin complicates and makes uncomfortably reveals it as a mirage in the essay. So Kevin, why don't you say a bit about that? And then I have like two rather nerdy ethics questions about it, but
okay. So in general, I'm participating in what I think is an Augustinian tradition of like deflating the views of any society about itself. That goes all the way back to ancient Rome, where Augustine did this and was basically like, look, even the early Christians thought, oh, once we have a Christian emperor, oh, Christianity is gonna spread. We're gonna take over the world. It's all gonna be awesome. We're heading towards the kingdom of God, right? We're gonna bring about by Rome. And Augustine comes around and says, no, that isn't how God works. Like, God might use like empires for maintaining stability for a particular period of time, but they aren't about bringing the kingdom. They're human things that are always partially corrupt and problematic. And this is in part what I want to do with the United States, and especially like I think a generation of us that grew up during this period where it felt like, right, especially after World War II, the United States was kind of riding a wave of global power and feeling ourselves to be the most powerful and the most moral nation in the world, and that this was just great. And now there is a perception, I think, widespread across the country that we've fallen from this place, right? We were this great nation, and now we're in a decline, and like morally in some way. And you get this in different versions on the right and the left, right? What it is that is the fall away from what we were. So on the right, of course, it's got to do, oh, we were, of course, this kind of Leave It to Beaver family in the 1950s and 60s, and we've fallen away from that. On the left now, we can look and we were like, oh my God, there are friggin' Nazis that are out literally marching around the United States. How did we get here? And so part of what I want to say in the talk is that what happened from like the 1940s to about the 1980s in the United States was a mirage. It made it easy for us to tell a story about ourselves being moral. But actually, when we analyze it, there's a whole bunch of social dynamics, things that are actually beyond anybody's control, that shift, that allow us to think of ourselves that way, that at times make our policies much better, at times actually do like change structures in positive ways, but they have very little to do with like the moral quality of American people. They have to do with the structures that are happening to the nation across. So, for instance, I point out like World War II has a massive moral dividend, is what I call it, for the United States, where we don't go to war. We like to think we went to World War II because we hated the Nazis, because we were better than the Nazis or whatever else. And we forget that, no, that's not why we went to World War II, right? We, as a matter of fact, let them do whatever they wanted to do until we were attacked at Pearl Harbor, and then decided, oh, we've got to be, I guess we're against this, right? I guess this must be who we are. We must be against this. And so, in part, we have to then imagine ourselves as being anti-Nazi, being like against And this gives a huge problem because the United States, of course, was a deeply racist, at the time, deeply anti-Semitic culture. But we have to incorporate that into our own self-image for a generation that, oh my God, we must be the opposite of the Nazis. And that then gives us this this crutch in our head where we're like, how do we make sense of our own racism then? Shouldn't we do something about our own racism? That if we are not the Nazis, if we're against racism, shouldn't we fix the stuff that's going on here? And that forces us to actually look internally and do some stuff and change some policies. And that has to do a lot with who we went to war with and how we had to construct ourselves as an opposite of that. The Great Depression is this economic shock that puts on hold American individualism and the emphasis on the free market economy for about a generation. Where I can remember my grandparents talking about the Great Depression and things, and people who would keep their money underneath their mattresses because they couldn't trust the banks and all this stuff. There's a generation that suffers this kind of trauma out of the Great Depression. But one of the things that this does is, well, it does a couple of things. It flattens out the economy. A lot of the people who were incredibly wealthy going into it lose their money. So you lose a top end of the economy. And it allows people then to support social programs to take care of the people on the bottom because everybody was at the bottom. So it's not so much that, oh, we became good people, right? We started, it was that everybody experienced this economic shock that allowed them to be like, oh my God, I am that poor person. Literally, I am that poor person. And so, yes, I want the government to come in because they're helping me when they do that. And once we get a generation out from that, where we don't have people that have had that experience, that then flies off to the side. We have low immigration across the period, especially the Cold War period, where borders become extremely strong because you can't cross over between your socialist and your capitalist economies. People are really suspicious of that. And so that allows you, so at the same time we're thinking we're anti-Nazi, right? We don't actually have to deal with incoming diversity. So that gives us a little bit of breathing room where we can focus on trying to deal with a little bit of our own racism without having to deal with other people coming in and the reactions against that. That, again, once the Cold War collapses, you have mass immigration start again, and then you've got to deal with that stuff, which causes a whole bunch of problems. At the same time, you've got the development of modern media. So we move out of a period where millionaires can own their own newspapers into television stations and stuff that they can't own. And so it falls to three major corporations who are competing on a national level, and they develop professionalization in order to try and reach out to the biggest audience, CBS, ABC, NBC. They professionalize news media, giving it standards, which lasts until about the 1980s. Then you start to get all of these radio shock jocks coming back in, and eventually Fox News, and then the internet that entirely collapses that whole thing as you go. You've also got this period of time, which is really fascinating, just in terms of people's time, that the development of modern technology frees people up in ways that they hadn't been free before, with washing machines and the dishwasher and all this stuff, that all of a sudden people have extra free time and they don't have much to do with it. And so they actually get social, they get political, they start participating in things like the PTA, like social clubs, like social sports. I mean, I know this is still a big thing, right? When I was a kid, I played AYSO soccer. So that's how I got into soccer as a kid, right? It's one of those things that became the culture that everybody's participating in these social organizations. Well, that makes everybody feel like they're a part of the society. They're people are listening to them. People are paying attention to them. That contributes to trust in the society, trust in the government, like the ability to feel like things are actually going well. Where then at the end of that period, we have the rise of entertainment media, which then entirely saps our time. And people feel now like they don't have any time, even though in some ways we have more time than we've ever had before. It just gets sucked out of us by TikTok and whatever. I've seen, so one of the most fascinating pieces I've seen on this recently. In 2007, the birth rate starts dropping in the West precipitously. And it's before the 2008 economic crash. And people had thought, like, okay, it makes sense that it would happen in the 2008 economic crash, but the drop starts before that. And it turns out the thing that the dropping birth rate is correlated to is when the iPhone came out. That the iPhone came out and people literally stopped having sex as much because they're spending their time on their phones.
No way.
Yeah, no, I mean, this is
watching the professionals do it.
Oh, man.
So, I mean, if you look at this, like the emergence of entertainment media has actually entirely changed our society in ways that we never could have seen coming.
Wow.
And one of the ways that it's done that is it sapped our participation in social activities. And this also plays out in other ways. So like unions. Unions were one of those social institutions that people invested in, paid attention to across this period. That then there's a whole other set of things that are going on related to the collapse of the economic agreement that ran across the 1940s to the 1980s, but also just social participation in those things goes away in part with the development of modern media and people spending their time in different ways. So this is it's a whole series of things. I got into this in 2016 when I was just in a deep depression after Donald Trump had gotten elected the first time. And
wait, you didn't want to make America great again?
I did not. I found myself wondering exactly what has gone wrong, right? What is it? How could we end up here? And I just started diving into it, and I kept seeing these charts that all had the same shape to them. That from the 1940s to the 1980s, if you look at economic inequality, it goes down from the 1940s. Then the 1980s, it starts back up. If you look at taxing, right, our tax rates go up, and then they go back down. If you look at participation in unions, the PTA, right, it goes up, and then it goes down. And I just kept seeing these patterns over and over again through all of these different areas. And I was just struck by the extent to which, this isn't anything that anybody planned. They couldn't have. There was no way to put all of this together. It was like a perfect storm of that led us to appear to be good for a little while. And in some ways, to actually embrace better policies and things that we can't get off the ground now, in part because we just don't have those things in place anymore. They don't sit in the same place. And so I guess the upshot of this is to say that there are reasons why, and it's not something that we can simply address by saying, ooh, we need to be better, right? It's not going to be that easy to address these problems. And the hope that I find in this is that Christianity is not dependent upon success. That's one of the lessons that goes all the way back. I mean, in part, this is what you have for worshiping a crucified Savior, right? Being a Christian is like being a Cubs fan. If you're in it for winning, it's not going to work out for you, right? That's not the case. You're in it. You are in favor of justice. You are in favor of goodness. You are fighting for the oppressed because that's the good thing to do, not because you will succeed in it regularly, reliably, in any way. I mean, it's kind of built into the thing, right? I'm going to fight on behalf of the people that don't have power. Well, guess what? If you fight on behalf of people that don't have power, you're gonna lose a lot. That's gonna happen, and that's built into the system, right? And that doesn't. So this is what it is to be a Christian: is to recognize sometimes the world sucks, and yet that's you keep going, right? Because that's what it is to follow the crucified Savior, is to say, hey, I'm on the side of those who are being crushed by the empire, and that's just how that might be how it remains, right? But that doesn't mean I'm going to stop being on their side, because that's what it is to be a Christian.
The idea of Cubs fans being a model of the Christian community just has me imagining Harry Carey giving a sermon.
Hey, let me ask you a question.
And
I gotta tell you guys,
take me out to the ball when the seventh inning stretch is most likely the highlight of the game. You're in the Cubs.
You're speaking my language. I grew up in suburban Chicago, and every day when I would come home from school, we would turn on WGN to try and catch the end of the Cubs game because they didn't have lights in the 80s. And so I will always remember that 84 team that made it all the way to the final against the San Diego Padres. I can probably still name every starter from that team. So you're speaking my language with this Cubs thing. I love the Cubs. Total side note, people think I'm lying about this. I went to Coleman Elementary School in Elgin, Illinois, and we had paper attendance records, right? So if you were absent, you got an A. If you were late, you got an L. And this is totally true. Mrs. Gravenport, my sixth grade teacher, if you went to a Wrigley afternoon Cubs game, it didn't count as an absence. You got a C. This is a true story. People think I'm lying.
C for Cubs.
C for Cubs. And people think I'm lying. And I'm like, no, your parents could take you to a Cubs game.
That's America. Afternoon. See, we don't have that anymore. If our local Grasshoppers team started having midday games and it was excused absences,
right?
But that would really ruin the having work meetings at afternoon baseball games and Ubering home, because it's different. But okay, Kevin, here's one of my questions.
Yeah.
All right. So you named these different forces: the Depression, Nazis. Oh, we're going to define ourselves as the good guys over against this. The consolidated media, party realignment you mentioned in the lecture, where you didn't have ideologically parsimonious parties because you had like liberal Republicans in the Northeast, that kind of thing. All those kinds of things, stuff that nobody planned, closed borders, dishwasher, and they're all accidental. And so if the good America did was a byproduct of luck, enemy making, where's the room for moral agency in politics? Like, did anyone in the 20th century actually do something good, or was it just weather, right? Like after the narrative, which I found compelling, then for those of us who want to do good, obviously Cubs fans and Jesus followers, but just anyone, even say non-religious people committed to a robust humanism. How does this theory change the way you see the agency of good when you introduce the kind of material, historical, and accidental factors?
Yeah. So this is H. Richard Niebuhr has a book called The Responsible Self, I think is the title of it, in which he goes over different models of how human beings like act. And one of them, he says the probably the most popular inside the United States is the man as maker. Now he uses gendered language. He's writing in the in a period where that could cover all of humanity, but talking about man as maker. And he says lots of Americans like to think of themselves as the man as maker, right? That you control what's going on in the world, that you could, well, going back to the, pull yourself up by your own bootstraps. Like you are going to be a self-made person and you're going to create everything. And this is the way. So you can, what are the limits? The limits are nothing. You can do whatever you want. And he says, yeah, that's unrealistic. That is not how human beings actually function. And he develops instead the idea of the responsible self, which is a self that responds. So a self that don't imagine that you make the world. You respond to the world as it is at a particular time. And you can spend all the time you want wishing that you were born in some other time, right? Oh, good Lord, I'm going to run into a J.R.R. Tolkien quote here. Right. If we had not, I know, we're not even in the second hour here yet.
You can do it early. I'm just not allowed to. It's okay, Kevin.
Oh, okay. All right.
We have a rule that Trip can't do it early.
You might need to help me with the quote though. So it is Gandalf talking about, right? The times, we don't get to choose the times that we are here, but this is the time that we are here, right? Which is a time of evil, a time of, right? I don't remember the exact quote, but
yeah, all we have to do, like Frodo is saying to Gandalf, I wish it need not happen in my lifetime.
Yeah.
And then Gandalf says, so do I. And so do all who live to see such times. But that is not for them to decide. All we have to decide is what to do with the time that is given us.
Yeah. So
and come on, Gandalf. Yeah.
Yeah. So that's exactly what H. Richard is saying, right? He's saying we don't get to choose what time we are in, right? We might wish that we could go back to that period from the 1940s to the 1980s and that we could participate in the civil rights movement of that time, right? Because it might be that the civil rights movement of our time doesn't look as clean, isn't as successful, isn't as, right? But we don't have that choice. What we have is the choice of how to respond to our world, the world that we are given, the world that we find ourselves in. And so moral agency isn't in that we can make the world however we want it to be, but it is in that we respond to the world as we find it. And we always are, the Christian calling is to try and do what you can within the context that you are given. And that always includes both the forces of evil, but also that God is doing something in the time that you are, right? And what you need to do is find what it is that God is doing, where it is that God is active in that time, and to align yourself with that and to work on that. And it might not be something that changes the world. It might be something that just makes somebody's life a little bit better for a period of time. And if that's what you can do, that's what you can do. You always find yourself responding to the world as it exists and the world as it is given to you.
That's a good word. Hey, I want to circle back to two things. Oh, you're muted, Trip.
Sorry, but Gandalf picks this theme up since I did not break the Tolkien seal. So there are two other bits where this theme comes up in other contexts that I had planned on bringing this up in the second hour. But when he's talking to Denethor, who's the steward of Gondor, Denethor is looking at Gandalf and is like, look, buddy, I'm the steward of Gondor. I have this obligation to Gondor. So obviously he wanted the ring to use there. He's got an agenda. And if the moment he feels fatalistic, Denethor's like, whatever, I'm done. And Gandalf is like, well, I too have a responsibility, but it's to Middle Earth, right? And where his description of what the vocation of the Istari, the ones whose like entire goal is like midwifing a new age of goodness into the world, is set up by going, yeah, that's your problem, is you actually think your allegiance is to one part of the puzzle, and then you become fatalistic about it. You check out, and you can't imagine a new world coming into being that you're not the steward of, right? And so there's this the horizon of your commitment question. And then when in Return of the King, when all after the Battle of Pelennor Fields, and they're deciding what they're going to do, like, are we going to go straight at the gate and hopefully make a distraction for Sam and Frodo if they're still able to go, right? All of them are sitting outside in their tent because we're not going to have the king come in to the city. He says, it is not our part to master all the tides of the world, but to do what is in us for the succor of those years wherein we are set, uprooting the evil in the fields that we know, so that those who live after may have clean earth to till. Whatever weather they shall have is not ours to rule. Right. And on all three of those ways, whether it's the micro, like, Frodo, what do you do with your agency? To Denethor, what do you do as a steward, a leader of a particular people? But then to, like, what do we do as a generation, right? You have there the leaders of all, representatives of all the people of Middle Earth, elves, dwarves, Rohan, Gondor, they're all there, hobbits. He's like, look, y'all are deciding whether or not to do the right thing as if you're in control of it and can plan out everything that's over there. But you can decide, regardless, to deal with the field that's in front of you. And the result of that is there's more possibility of fruit being sown for your kids and your grandkids. And all of those have this sense of, I don't think King meant it this way, but the original long arc, of history bends towards justice, has this kind of like progressivism that Niebuhr is critical of underneath it. But Gandalf and Galadriel, if you want, I don't mind dramatically reading her as well, has the long, slow defeat is a theme that runs through Tolkien. Is that, look, we're finite beings on a planet. The human condition, because of finitude, is one that if you are fatalistic, like the temptation of Denethor and Frodo, to be overwhelmed with evil, then you check out of being responsible. But you can also go the other way of assuming the energy of history is towards bliss and utopia, and then you'll check out of responsibility, right? And the long, slow defeat, which is in a conversation of Galadriel and Gandalf, but it was Tolkien's very Catholic view of history, as someone that grew up with an Augustinian. It is very much, I think, resonant with the Augustine shout out, in the lecture, that we are agents in history, and there's a responsibility there, but we're not the like author of it. And but there's like those fatalisms on either side. But the long, slow defeat is like, there's this big picture, and it's way beyond you, and things eventually end.
Yeah.
And if the end is the only thing that secures meaning for you, then you're actually being warped away from the very place your agency has purchased.
Yeah. I mean, this is where we get into the theology of eschatology. And, I mean, honestly, it's a place where I'm not terribly comfortable because I'm never sure what I'm talking about when I talk about eschatology. But
Bo has a chart though, if you need help.
oh yeah. Oh yeah. I mean, there are lots of people who are really sure what they're talking about when they talk about eschatology. But I get questions every once in a while with people who are like, okay, but do you believe that the world is going to end and then there's going to be and I'm like, I don't know how all this works out. Like, but that there is a Christian confidence that our imperfection is taken up by God's perfection, right? That there is a hope beyond simply what we are doing, a hope beyond even those goals that we have, that it is taken up into a divine narrative, that it is taken up into what God is always doing. And I want to see that always in the hope of the new moment that's given to us, right? Even though even though we are going to screw that up too, right? Every new moment that's given to us is a new possibility that's given to us by God. And that is part of where God continues to lay out like the possibilities for us to move forward. And that's where we find that agency, is in that new moment that's given to us. Even though we are stuck in the light of what has come before, we always have a little bit of movement in the current moment, that we can change things a little bit for the better, and that we believe that God in some way takes that up and connects it with the perfection of God's aims. And how that happens and what that means, I'm not entirely sure, right? Does that mean that at some point after I die, I will experience that? Does that mean there will be a literal kingdom? I have no idea exactly how that works. But part of my confidence as a Christian, part of my hope as a Christian, is that in some way, right, the belief that God is doing that and will do that and will take our imperfections and align them with perfections, which means that I don't have to be perfect, right? I don't have to make that world that brings all of this about. But I have confidence that God is in the process of doing that, and that God's agency succeeds where mine fails.
All right, I want to circle back to some ideas that I just want to, because we have Kevin, I love playing with different ideas, because your perspective that you bring and your academic discipline, you sort of play a different note. You're like having a French horn in a rock band, and it's fun. And so I
think more like bagpipe, but yeah, okay.
All right, a bagpipe and a rock band. I really enjoy it. So a couple things I want to circle back on. One is, when we talk about generational differences and how things can change in just 2 generations, so like from the 40s to the 80s, in early Methodism, there's a fascinating example of this, a case study. And Tripp, you may not know this, but the early Methodists, they started out as Anglicans, but they were kindly asked to leave. And one of the big complaints about them was something called enthusiasm. And they sang a little too robustly. They lived a little too passionately. They were a little too zealous about personal piety. And so they were excused from the adult table and relegated to the kids table.
Too excited for Anglicans.
Yeah. Too excited for Anglicans.
Like they clapped once.
Yes. But here's what happened. Here's the fascinating study sociologically, is just 2 generations later. So that first generation of Methodists, they did something interesting. They abstained from alcohol. They didn't gamble. And they taught their kids to read so they could read the Bible. You put these 3 things together, and what happened is that next generation that was raised Methodist, so not the ones who migrated away from Anglicanism, but that first generation that was raised Methodist, they saved their money. They lived in structured ways that facilitated raising kids, and they taught Sunday school. And so their children were educated and literate. So they had a little bit of affluence. They had stability, and they had education. So that second generation that was raised Methodist became well-to-do. They rose up in society. They were a little lofty, and they became the kind of proper English folks that the Anglicans who asked them to leave would have found completely acceptable.
Yeah.
And
they just didn't have that old money. They just didn't have that old money.
Yeah.
That's exactly right. I mean, so the Methodists were lower class Anglicans, right? That's how we started. And even when I was a kid, we still had major arguments in the church about whether you could wear a robe as a minister. Because they were still, there were still some that felt like, that's too like hoity-toity, like that feels too like high church. And of course, now I think most Methodist churches, you'd never even like have a question about that. Of course, you could wear a robe as a minister, right? What was it? Wesley's advice with money was make all that you can, save all that you can, give all that you can. And he said the Methodists were really good at the first two. And that shaped the Methodists going forward. I mean, this is one of the things I think that you find again and again in institutions, and this goes back to like the ideas of Weber and Trelsch. So Weber said what starts an institution oftentimes is a charismatic leader, right? You get somebody with charisma. And for him, he was like, this is this undefinable thing that just allows you to break out of the mold and do things. And you have this massive energy that flows from it. And he saw this to be, you can go back to in Christianity, right? Christianity, Jesus is the charismatic figure who was a radical, who for him is like breaking away from everything else. But then what happens after that is institutionalization. You get rationalization of things. You establish institutions, you calm down, you become much more respectable, as things go. And I think that's important. I think, as a matter of fact, what would be great is if we could have that in left Christianity today, like a development that is so right wing people will talk all the time about like renewal movements and like they're expecting this coming of the Holy Spirit, but they also are very good then about building institutions out of that, and building their television stations and all of this stuff, and building those then for the long run. I think that actually we need that on the left in a way that happened during this period from the 1940s to the 1980s. I mean, that's where you had this massive growth of the mainline tradition, exactly when those Methodists were becoming respectable, establishing institutions, and you had the ELCA, the Episcopalians, the PCUSA that were like the main movements in religion in America. And it is shocking to me when I go out there that people just don't even know about that history anymore. I mean, you look at all these people who are involved in like deconstruction, and they're coming out of evangelicalism. And it's like, what happened was the main lines got institutionalized. And then unfortunately, a lot of the energy that had been in that institutionalization got sapped off. And then the entire thing kind of collapses. And I do think that one thing that we are, those of us who have some agency, right, ought to be looking towards how we could do is exactly getting that movement. It's one of the things I like about actually homebrewed Christianity and the new evangelicals and sojourners is that they are some of those kinds of institutions that develop out, and you could start like building on to get something bigger, because that just happens, right? That's a cycle that happens in all movements as they go. And I mean, in part, they become institutionalized, and then we end up being like, oh, we hate institutions, right? And we want to leave them behind, but we also need them. We also need those things and those setups. And I think the Methodists, we became an institution for a long time, and we're kind of on the decline at this point. And so we need to figure out, what's the next thing. It might not be, denominationalism. There's all sorts of people that are trying to save the denomination. It's like, that might not be what it looks like. But let's look for something new then. Let's try something different that works in this period, that doesn't work the way that it did from the 40s to the 80s.
You may not know this. I was raised Free Methodist.
Yeah, you mentioned this last time I was on. Yeah.
So it was easy for me as a Wesleyan to convert to United Methodists. But one of the really challenging things, and this is my fourth appointment within the United Methodist system, is when I arrive at a new place, I ask people, where are your children? How, are your children raising their children with any religious orientation at all?
Right.
One of the things that is so disheartening to me is that whatever this expression of mainline Christianity is so uncompelling and uninspiring that this entire generation below the boomers, they were raised in churches like this, and then when they went off to college, they never went to church again.
Yeah.
And it's insane to me how whatever we think about discipleship or our confirmation process, it is so uncompelling and it doesn't provide people a structure for ethical living from a Christian orientation. So just outside my room here is our sanctuary. And in the late 50s, they had to retrofit in our sanctuary a 250-seat balcony to hold all of the kids and parents that were going to go to Sunday school when the kids were dismissed. So the parents and the children would sit up in this balcony, and then during the passing of the peace, they'd say, all right, children are dismissed their classes. And then everyone would leave and go out to the education wing that's connected via a bridge to our balcony. Fast forward 50 years, the balcony's empty, and people are actually upset because it was built in a way that cut in half our two giant panels of stained glass. And there are still people here who would support me if I wanted to take out the balcony. There are people who would support that because then we could restore the stained glass floor to ceiling.
The old church arguments. Oh my God. Well, but this is one of those things that I do watch the like church growth, church decline narratives. And in part, I think that we also need to understand that that's a part of these movements that we don't have control over. So if you look at the 1940s to the 1980s, being a Christian, right, was a part of being anti-communist. I mean, not being, so it was part of this. So once we get past World War II, as I say, there was a moral dividend to World War II, which was that it made us anti-Nazi. After that, we end up in the Cold War. There's also a moral dividend to the Cold War, in that it holds us together, it unifies us as a country. There's you can't be as partisan during the Cold War as you can be today, right? But it also reinforces American institutions. And one of the ways that it does that, you look at the 1950s, they're adding in, under God to the pledge. They're putting, trusting God on the coinage. But you also have to recognize that wasn't Christian nationalism like we think about today. That was mainline American, like, political religion, right? Everybody knew we're not saying we're Christian fundamentalists. That wasn't what they were saying by adding those things in. They were saying, guess what? We're not atheistic communists, right? This is something, and the mainline churches were part of that identity of America that ran through that. And so one of the things that was filling up churches across that period wasn't even about whether the message was compelling from the church or not. It was about national identity.
Wow.
And at the same time, it was the time that people had that extra social time, right? That had been created by modern technology and not yet sapped off by the entertainment media. And what were people doing? They were going and volunteering at Vacation Bible School. They were teaching Sunday school. They were going to my parents, right, were a part of a Sunday school class that still gets together today. They're all spread out across the United States. They're retired, but they still get together every once in a while because they became best friends with each other. They went square dancing with each other. They hung out with each other, right? That was their that was what they did. That was their social time. And I just think if you look at contemporary generations, that's not even a possibility today, right? I mean, like my kids say they have friends. I have never seen their friends. When I was a kid, everybody got together at people's houses, hung out. Now they text. My daughter graduated, and a group of her friends came over for her graduation party, and I was like, "Oh my God, these are real people." I was not sure this entire time, right? But no, they hung out and they sat around and they talked and they joked, and I was like, "This is what it was like when I was in high school. We did this all the time, right?" But she doesn't do that. They're all in a group together and they're texting each other and they're telling each other jokes, but they're not in the same physical space with each other.
Interesting.
And so I think those things, right, have impacted the ways that churches function. And churches oftentimes look internal. They're looking like, okay, why are we not compelling anymore, right? What's wrong with our message? What's wrong with our programming? And it's like, you know what? The world has changed in a way that just doesn't work out the same anymore. And I do wonder, the question then is what can you do in the future, because it won't look like that has looked in the past. I wonder about getting together and forming communities around things that involve social justice issues that you can like expand out and be like, you know what, you don't have to agree with me on the God stuff, but we need social organizations that are getting together for this. And so I'll do that on the basis of my Christianity. You can do it because you're a member of the the Church of Satan or whatever. Like I don't care. Like we get together and we'll do this together. Like what do those institutions look like that are going to be for the future? Because I don't think we can't just go back to. We are so often tempted to think, oh, if only we could get our programming right. Oh, if only we could get our message right, we could go back to the way it was before. And the world has just changed in ways that makes that not an immediate possibility.
Trip, I want to tell a funny story. I want to tell a funny story.
One quick fact is that about what y'all were just saying.
Yeah.
And this came up at one of the times Ryan Burge and I were doing something, that the median income of actual church attenders is $120 to $150. Like if you actually show up regularly at a church, it is an economic privilege. The growing number of people in the precarious class that are no longer the middle class, the growth of gig work, all these kinds of things actually just undermine, right, that rhythm and time of life Kevin was talking about, where think of how long after you leave youth group that you're eventually financially and geographically stable enough to invest free time in a religious community. Right. So like all those material features are rather significant, and there's layers of it.
All of our young families here, either somebody works Sunday morning or it's their only day off, and that's when they get to do errands, sleep in, have time with their kids, right? Like go visit grandma. It's their only day off, so they spend their morning in different ways. Literally every single young family we have is in that situation.
Mm-hmm.
All right, Trip, here's my funny story. When not here in Idaho, but when I first got appointed to my church in Portland, I had been a professor at the seminary and I was transitioning into local church ministry. And I had invited all of my seminary students to come and all of my neighbors in where I was living, because I was inheriting a church that had dropped under 30 in weekly attendance. And I wanted to show them what having 70 people in worship looked like. So I had invited everyone for this first Sunday. And all of my my DS and everyone. I wanted everyone there. So I had arrived early and I was setting out name tags, like the hello, my name is, and you write your name with a little sticky on the back. And one of my beautiful saints, who I came to love, but was not very happy about me being there, was afraid I was going to ruin her church. She comes up beside me as I'm setting out the name tags on the welcome table, and she goes, "What are you doing?" And I said, "Putting out name tags so that people can." And she goes, "We all know each other. You're the only one who doesn't know our names." And I said, "No, for new people." And she literally said, I'm not making this up, "Why would anyone new come here?" And I said, "Why do you come here?" And she said, "Well, these are where all my friends are, and this is where I get my civic responsibilities done."
Yeah.
And I was like, I have a big challenge ahead of me to change this mentality.
Mm-hmm.
She didn't even expect that anyone would ever visit the church that she loved so much, that her only friends were in the church, and all of her resources went to making it work. And she still thought no one new will ever show up here and join us.
Mm-hmm. No, this is so another one of these factors that plays into the change in church is that people used to be much more regionally fixed in their lives. And so you would have multi-generational churches, right? So people would be going to the same church that their parents went to, that their grandparents went to, and you show up every week then because oh, my mom's going to notice if I'm not there. My grandma's going to notice if I'm not there, right? With the destabilization and mobilization of people, all of a sudden you end up in new communities where nobody's checking if you're going to church, right? And then so like this, like the woman that you're describing, right? Probably it's a fixed thing, right? Everybody who's gone to this church is everybody who's gone to this church, and for a while that's fine, as long as those families continue to grow and stay in the same place. The church can actually function that way. But once that breaks down, then you're like, okay, hold on. We can't just survive on the same families that have always been here, because we're actually losing people over time to that. And that's another one of those elements that just the mobility of people inside the United States has significantly changed in ways that don't underwrite that continuing structure of churches that's going on. So yeah, I mean, I don't see the problem with this is I have a good analysis of what all the problems are. I don't have a great analysis of what the solution is to any of these problems. I wish that I was better at coming up with solutions instead of just pointing out what all the problems are.
Kevin, so what if you build a storm on purpose? So let's say everyone is convinced mid-century looked decent by accident. And so then that makes my generation's distrust of institutions rational, not cynical. We watched neoliberalism and it's doing a train wreck, but grandparents watched the New Deal work. That can leave you in a little bind of sorts. So if goodness in public life is contingent, accidental and such, and the accidents have stopped happening that have generated the perks, is there anything to do besides wait for another catastrophe to scare us into human decency? Or could we engineer your splendid vice? Are the accelerationists actually the pioneers of a virtuous future.
Yeah, I mean, in terms of political strategy, I do think that this is a question that, say, you see the Democratic Party wrestling with today, right? Because the Democratic Party, you've always got these arguments between centrists and more leftists in the party, and I think that the
It's because they
centrists.
didn't half the Republicans.
Yeah, I mean, I do think that the centrists have a view that's kind of based on this. Hold on, can't we get back to the 1990s? Right? Can't we? Can't if we just stabilize things? Won't things basically be like the 1990s were? And the answer is no. You've lost that. It's done. And so yeah, I mean, I do think that a lot of people in politics in the United States are responding off of their negative feelings about where we are and their feelings that things have collapsed and that we need some radical solution. And I think that that's actually how you got a lot of people voting for Trump. Not because they believed in particularly what, Trump's particular solutions, but that they believed that Trump was somebody who was going to shake things up,
disrupt.
Yeah, he was gonna disrupt the way that things were happening. And
I'm not
to
sure
some
he
extent,
believed in his particular solutions either.
yeah, I don't know. Yeah, I don't know that he's got any particular solutions for anybody but himself. But this, I mean, in part, they were right. I mean, he's disruptive, he's disruptive in a way that makes himself $2 billion and leaves the United States public all the worse for it. Now the question is then, could you channel that energy into a kind of disruption from the left that would move? And I do think that this is part of what you're seeing in some of the elections happening in like New York City.
Sure.
And this is that, look, and the time to do it is actually exactly in reaction to Trump, because people are grumpy. They are upset about where things are. That means they're upset with Trump right now. They were upset with Biden for exactly the same reason, that they didn't like where things were. They wanted to disrupt. So give them another option. Give them something that is another way of playing this out. And I think that you can then achieve something, provided that Donald Trump allows the midterm elections to go forward, that you can achieve something, but you've got to realize that it's a very fragile thing in the United States right now, because what's happening with politics is basically everybody's upset. And so they're just voting out whoever is in power. And so you've got about 2 years to do something, right? Once you get into any position of power. And you're going to need to try and take advantage of those 2 years. And the problem for the Democrats is I just don't know whether they're that coherent that they could actually organize themselves to get something done in the period of time where you actually have the ability to make change. Because it only comes about, I think Trump's got this 2 years where he's got everything lined up in his favor, right? And he's just got free reign to do whatever. Then we're going to hit the midterms. He's going to lose at least the House, might lose the Senate, depends on exactly how that works out. But he's going to lose that ability to like control everything. Then, with any luck, right, things keep going bad. People continue to vote against Trump. You get somebody who's going to run on the Democratic side. You get a Democrat, and they might have then a complete control. But they'll only have it for 2 years too. So you've got to figure out, in part, this is the thing, is in those 2 years, you've got that time to try and change things. And that's about all you can do. And so you have to figure out how much you can change. And the Republicans, unfortunately, have been better at doing this because they've been willing to just chuck out every limitation that they have on them and change everything that they can in those 2 years. Whereas the Democrats can't get organized enough to do that. So in short, could you manufacture some massive change. I think it's possible in a very short term you would have to do it. The question is whether you could actually get organized enough to do it. And again, I'm not looking at the Democrats. I'm not optimistic.
Really?
Hey,
Yeah,
Trip, I want to give you, we're going to do a nerd option. I'm going to give you three authors. I'm going to give you three authors, and you get to pick which one we talk about next. Okay. Should we talk about Chris Hedges' Death of the Liberal Class? Should we talk about Derrida's conception of difference as it applies to eschatology? Or should we talk about Walter Benjamin's Angel of History?
Oh, this is inappropriate. That is I like all three. What about Kevin pick?
Oh, Kevin, which would you rather talk about?
I'm good with any of them. Golly. I mean, the theologian in me wants to do Derrida, but the social analyst in me wants to do Hedges. So I'll narrow it down to those.
All right,
two.
we'll do Hedges. We'll do Hedges.
Okay, we'll do Hedges.
So Chris Hedges wrote this book, Death of the Liberal Class.
Went to Union Theological Seminary.
Studied with Reinhold Niebuhr.
Yeah, there you go. There's our connection point.
Mm-hmm.
He has this incredible sort of view that what the liberal class used to, how it functioned, how it served in society, was that it was sort of a steam valve that let off the pressure when the tensions would build up. And that with the demise of that class, like we've been talking about, that what used to be called centrist has migrated and there is no center anymore. Yeah. And how we are suffering for that is that there is no mechanism by which the tensions of this bipartisan system that we have are let out and relegated or, just in any way managed. And so without that function, that mechanism in society, what we are experiencing is just this internal sort of rupturing where it can't hold together because the center has disappeared and there's no center anymore. And so we're just seeing the societal de-evolution or devastation of being torn apart without any coherent way of being knit together, and that we're suffering for the lack of this mechanism to let off steam.
Yeah. I mean, so what I would say to that is I think if you look before the 1940s and after the 1980s, you're going to see the same thing in that the extreme inequality in society. You go back before the 40s, you get back to like the Gilded Age, and of course the period where we had all the robber barons and where we created like Carnegie and created like all of these, super wealthy members of society. You have the Great Depression that hits, and I think this is he's right that what happens there is you had an option. You could have gone with a kind of communist revolution, right? At that point, as a matter of fact, there were people like Reinhold Niebuhr at the time who were basically in favor of that or thought that that was going to happen inside the United States. Then you have FDR come into power, and he creates the center, right? What Hedges is talking about as the center there, because he takes the ideas from leftists, right? And he says, we're not going to do a revolution, but we're going to use these ideas as policy elements and we're going to take them into the institution, and we're going to use that. And so he creates like the public works projects and, puts people to work, and they create the welfare system, and they create unemployment insurance, and they create like all of these things. And basically he creates this kind of middle ground that is the what I called the Great Society economics in the lecture, which is exactly this kind of putting together the institutions of society and social welfare projects, which I think is what he's talking about when he talks about those things that actually address some of the issues, right? That let off steam from the working class, that allow you to and actually allow people to raise themselves up in the economy in ways that they can't afterwards. I think that breaks apart at Reagan, basically. That Reagan, again, there's an economic shock that ends things in the 1980s. And in part, that's driven by, again, multiple different things that are going on there. Richard Nixon actually interferes with the Fed and tries to get the Fed to lower interest rates in order to boost the economy, which shoots then the inflation in the economy up. Then there's an oil embargo from OPEC that ends up further hurting inflation, but not getting the economy to go anywhere. And so you have this economic emergency, and everybody's running around trying to figure out how to fix it. And it turns out there's no good way to fix it other than letting getting past the oil embargo. Because it's caused by outside forces, but everybody's trying internal, like what policy mechanisms can we do? And what ends up happening is that Reagan sells this narrative that what's caused this is big government, what's caused this is taxation, what's caused this is our not participating in the free market enough, what's caused this is government overreach, right? And he sells that as the solution to this. And he sells that at the same time that the oil embargo is ending. And so the economy does, in fact, start taking off. And people start buying into that as this new narrative for the economy. And that ends up landing us right back where we were before FDR. And that leads to, again, the growth of inequality. And I think there's a lot of truth to that what we face today is a problem where we have this problem of inequality, this problem of the inability to move yourself around in the economy, and people upset about that. And then we have people selling them on different narratives about why it is that they ended up in this situation. And the narrative that, say, Trump sold was, oh, it's the immigrants. It's that they have come in, they've boosted up housing prices, and they've taken away your jobs. This is really what, is the driver for that. And of course, that narrative, the downside of that is that narrative is just blatantly false. It's not the case that immigrants coming into the country weren't taking away jobs that people wanted anyway. They weren't boosting housing prices. That's just absurd. We had a collapse of the housing industry that did that. And we haven't been building houses, which is a huge problem. So there's all sorts of problems that come along with that. I do think, again, the question is, how could you get back to a system that actually does function in that way, that addresses these economic concerns in ways that people will buy off on? Because part of the problem is that people just aren't good enough. People don't accept true narratives, right? People are so willing to accept that, oh, it's the immigrants' fault. So willing to accept the story that, for goodness sake, the whole trans people in sports narrative is just fascinating, where we're going to get you to react as aggrieved people to the way that all these trans people are coming into sports and stealing away, first place medals from the people. And it's like, that's not happening. That's not real, right? But what it's doing is it's selling people who are aggrieved, who feel like they've been screwed over, some scapegoat that they can be blamed, rather than actually addressing the primary economic issues, the primary issues that are driving people to feel aggrieved. Which is I mean, for God's sake, if you're feeling aggrieved, you ought to feel aggrieved and focus on the problem of Elon Musk rather than focusing on the problem of immigrants. If you want to know who's making money off the current economy, it's not the immigrants who are coming in and doing it. It's Bill Gates. It's Amazon. It's all of these
What about
massive
the
corporations.
Nephilim immigrants? They're
an ongoing problem. That is, yes.
Yeah. So, okay, Kevin, I have an FDR related question. So like when FDR comes in, he ends up saving American capitalism by enacting a kind of diluted version of the socialist agenda.
Yeah.
I mean, Roosevelt does nearly 90% of what the Socialist Party's platform was at that time, like Social Security, labor rights, public works, these kinds of things. But in a sense, it was nationalizing Fordism, where you create a system of high wages and mass consumption that generates a new kind of stable social contract. And that kind of cements the vital center consensus that generates, going back to the Bo's whole prompting here about the end of liberalism. In the New Deal was like so successful at establishing our not nearly as robust welfare state version of capitalism in Europe, that even the Republican Party, they eventually accept its basic premises. And at least when he was running, Donald Trump let everyone know that I'm not touching Social Security and blah, blah, blah. What was it that got everyone mad at Bush the moment he started to mess with welfare programs? So but
I think you mean entitlements.
Oh yeah, and so one of the things I've been thinking about is that in making Fordism the center of the New Deal is harder to imagine when our economic system no longer functions that way, right? It's like we used to have larger corporations that fund the growing middle class, and who the market runs on were middle class purchasers, right? And at this point, the only thing the middle class is promised is cheap TVs built elsewhere. You aren't promised like the ability to actually afford a car or a house or education or childcare, and you can afford your health care as long as you're in the right part to get of your taxes to get the supplements and don't get too sick, and and the nation, the economic engine of the country is so alienated from the middle class that you literally put the barons behind the president when he's being sworn in. We can see the military industrial complex, the growing surveillance state, the growth of AI, and it's being interwoven into the national project. To me, there's what we didn't have, what we don't have now is even a model of a middle class generating market to nationalize, right? Part of what FDR did, and there are plenty of limits to what he did that were connected to the time, like not letting in Jews into the country, or I mean, he was tight on immigration. The way in which racial policies in the national investment created bigger gaps, but we don't have an economic model that's generating an elevator to the middle class to nationalize.
Yeah.
And instead, what we're nationalizing is gambling apps, algorithm distractions,
yep,
delivery services, for weed. Like, we'll go through the list of growth industries that are dependent on the middle class, and they're extractive of both attention, the ability to invest, the ability to advance yourself. It's there, like, those don't exist in the very places that would generate the middle class, like public education, healthcare, childcare, uh, uh, homes, which were like the way in which the majority of Americans can ever really retire. We're not allowing that, while both parties are running on stupid policies to, like, not like baby boomers shouldn't have to sell their homes. We're not going to pay they're not going to have to pay property taxes. That's what we're figuring out ways for baby boomers can still suck on. They already took all the wealth of their grandparents, and now they're going to make sure they don't have to contribute to their future. And they're all freaking out. And like, I've seen both parties in the last week have had people running saying we're not going to have property tax on retirees. And this is why I don't think we're that far from stuff going south, because if you look at the history of the West, when things get violent and revolutions happen, it's not when the poor find out they're still poor. It's when people that were not born poor did what their parents and mentors told them to, know they're getting screwed. That's when you shoot a executive of a health insurance company and become a hero. Or we go through the list and think of, like, nobody, like, you're getting booed if you bring up AI to college graduates. And the only thing baby boomers can think to say is, like, they're probably cheating on their papers, which they are, because they know everything's a competition, and they just need things not to learn, not to be a good citizen, not to, like, further yourself or cultivate the habits of wisdom. The entire educational industry is turned into an extractive way to have debt slavery for the younger generation. And they know fewer people will make it to the middle class. So you're going to do by whatever means necessary to get through. And so, like, the real problem, they're going to cheat on their papers. No, the real problem is that a few billionaires took the collective commons of our entire species and are selling access to it. Like, that might be anyway, I'm just sitting here thinking, I got plenty of things that run through my head that junk could get awkward, but I don't see a model that's available to nationalize. Like, what do we got? Uber. Like, anyway, the market has undermined not just the social institutions that we started with. It's undermined the ability for a vibrant middle class to have social relationships of solidarity. And it's undermined a model of coming into civic ownership and responsibility. Right? When you feel like you're not a part of something and you don't have agency in the market, agency in your home, and agency in the government, then you're leaving people to feel that they have nowhere to go. And it's not surprising when you do that things just get worse. And the fact that it's getting worse, and with the growing ability of the surveillance state, and I'm just not going to be surprised if things get really, really ugly. And if you're in that situation, which I just feel like any moderately attentive person should get most of it, to then listen to moderate Democrats is just like stab my face stupid. Like, they really, like, well, anyway.
Yeah.
Thank you for coming to Trip Therapy Session.
So what you highlight is two other reasons that we can't just go back to, what was before, which is the globalization of the economy, which was one of the things that ended up shifting. I mean, the United States used to be a big manufacturing center, right? But with the globalization of the economy, a lot of that work, a lot of that, wealth production ended up leaving the United States, and in ways that are not coming back. No matter how much you try your tariff junk that Trump has put out, that's not going to be a solution to what's going on. That's trying late 1800s solution to a 21st century problem. The other is the development of technology that has just undermined this whole set of jobs for skilled laborers who are actually laborers, not managers, right? So we see the development of machines that can do the work of human beings, and then AI that's coming in and further taking away this. And I think you're entirely right that what we need is a new model of how things work. And exactly what that looks like. I mean, you do see people talking about things like what would it look like if we had a base living wage, and then what do we do with the labor? So people need things to do to give themselves meaning. How are we going to do that? How are we going to figure out how to keep people working in meaningful ways, and how can you keep them getting wealth and creating wealth? And the problem is that our politics, at the same time as we need that kind of radical rethinking of our economy, we're in the worst political shape for actually doing anything about it. Because what we need is a whole bunch of really good creative economists thinking about new models for the economy and trying to put those in place at a time when, yeah, I think you're right. Centrist Democrats want to go back to the 1990s. Republicans want to go back to apparently the late 1800s. It's the worst time to be in need of this kind of continuous rethinking of, or almost entire rethinking of what the economy looks like in a way that would address all of these problems. And what we're facing in the immediate future is just more destabilization because of AI that we don't even understand yet what that actually looks like. In the short term, what it's looked like so far is that young people are unable to get jobs even when they get out of college. And as a college professor, that really, really worries me for on multiple grounds, but in part just because I'm watching these young people get out there and not have success in the world in being able to find a place for themselves. And I think you're right. That just leads to more people being more aggrieved. I don't know how that ends up moving forward. The only hope that I have is that somebody actually does start thinking about this and figures out a political regimen where you could actually start moving in that direction of something new. But how do you do that? It's such a problem.
Hey, one thing I wanted to touch on with the time we have left is this myth of presumed innocence, of the idea that America, we can make it great again. You put forward, it's not that we need to be great again. We were never good.
Mm-hmm.
So I want to circle back to that, because one of the great parts about moving to southern Idaho is that it is not on one of the elite coasts, right? It's not on the left coast, and it is a little bit rural. It's our biggest industry is agriculture around here, and so I've never lived in the mountain time zone before. And one of the interesting things is it is like going back in time a little bit. It's an interesting thing. So, for instance, I have recently been recruited and have been attending Kiwanis.
Oh, yeah.
And I've never been a part of anything like that before. And so it is a throwback to a previous era, like you were talking about, of, for me, civil engagement like that. I've never been a part of a group. I've never had any interest. I've actually never known anybody my age who was a part of something like that.
Right.
But one of the interesting things that happens is, we sing the national anthem. We do the Pledge of Allegiance. We sing our state theme, and then somebody prays. And in those prayers, I have noticed something a little disturbing, which is, so when I pray, because I come from a holiness background, a charismatic background, when I pray, I actually think I'm talking to God. And so my prayers sound like that. I haven't been in a place in a long time where prayers are mini sermons.
Yep.
And sometimes in these sermons, they will point out things like, that Jesus is the only way, or that the youth of America, need to turn, or whatever it is, or that our founding fathers and our right to vote. Like, there are these mini sermons that get preached in the guise of prayer. It sort of pisses me off a little bit.
Yeah.
But the thing I want to tell you that and I've been thinking about this ever since I watched your essay video, is this guy comes up to me almost every week to talk to me about the evils of Islam. And one of the things that has happened is I don't know what he's reading at his church, but they're doing some sort of Sunday school about the evils of Islam. And he figured out
which is a big problem in Idaho, right? I mean, you've got
to, Sharia law is right around the corner.
Sharia law,
you got to outlaw that junk.
Yeah,
but all of that is prolegomena for what I want. Here's the story I want to tell you and hear your feedback on. So he thinks I'm interested in this because he found out I went to an interreligious school in Claremont and studied alongside people who were going to end up being imams, Orthodox priests, Buddhist monks. Like, we were all in class together. And so he thinks I know something about Islam. Thank God I do know a little bit. But anyway, so he comes up to me last week and he says, hey, I really want to talk to you about this thing that I've heard you say, which is that there are many kinds of Islam and that we need to listen to Muslim American voices because they have clearly figured out how to navigate being Muslim in America.
Yeah.
So instead of reading fundamentalist Christians badmouth Islam, I told him we need to actually listen to American Muslim voices. So he took me seriously, thank God, and he started listening and reading different things other than what his church was providing him. That sounds like a good thing, but when you run it through a lens of presumed American innocence, it doesn't help that much. So he comes to me last week and says, hey, I really want to get together with you and maybe invite some of the people from my Sunday school class, because the more I look into this, the more concerned I am that President Trump doesn't know what he's up against. And I said, how is that? And I'm not kidding about this. This is a true story. And he says, the kind of Islam in Iran, I mean, they're like religious zealots who have permission for violence because of how they interpret this book. And I'm staring at him thinking, wait, are we against religious zealots who have permission for violence because of a book?
Because of the way they interpret their book. Yeah.
That's a true story. That actually, and I was like, I got to talk to Tripp and Kevin about this.
Did you bring up Tarantino's 3rd chapter 41st verse?
It was just one of those moments where I'm like, oh, okay. So you think we're the good guys and they're the bad guys. And therefore, when they do it, it's bad. And when we do it, it's good.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I'm always flummoxed. I guess this keeps me being an Augustinian because when I hang out with, my academic friends, we all have this kind of subtle, nuanced view about the world, right? And I forget the extent to which the world is really held together by oversimplified. I mean, I don't want to say like, okay, so tribalism, I understand there are problems with the term tribalism because actually, historically, tribes have been like, there have been good manifestations of that. But in the negative sense, like the extent to which the world is held together by tribalism, by the sense that people need to think about themselves and people like them as similar as posed against everybody else who is not like them and who need to embrace binaries that are like we are good, they are bad. And I I I forget about that, but I run into it all the time doing pop scholarship, doing and it's exactly this stuff that is what was so Trump apparently put out a tweet the other day that was critiquing this kindergarten class because the graduates were all wearing hijabs in their kindergarten graduation picture.
Yeah.
And it's like, what are you talking about? Like, what is it's a Muslim school, for God's sake. Your problem is that they're dressing in the ways that their culture is. I saw a guy complaining the other day about the fact that Target had in Michigan, in these places where they have large Muslim populations, had like converted one of their changing rooms into a prayer room, and I'm just like, that's awesome, that's cool. And he was just like, fuck Target, right? And I'm just like, why is it? But I do think, I mean, you go back to Augustine, and Augustine says what holds together societies is not what they love in common, because we aren't good enough to be driven by our loves. What holds together societies is that we find somebody in common that we can hate, because that is actually what drives us as people. And he analyzes, this is part of his analysis of Rome, is that Rome has always thought that it's held together by some sense of justice. And he's like, BS, that is not true. Rome has never been held together by its height of ideals and whatever else. It's been held together by the fact that it had Carthage to fight against, and that they could picture the Carthaginians as these evil, despite the fact that the Carthaginians are just like the Romans, right? They're able to think about these people. And I do think, like, looking back at American history, the extent to which we were able to construct, the communists as the bad guys who we were against, construct the Nazis as the bad guys that we were against. And the fact that today we don't have one coherent external enemy, at which point we have to construct members of our own society as our enemies. And that just brings about so much trouble internally, because we do, as human beings, we are so driven by, we need that for our unity. We need somebody to hate together. Wow. And it's unfortunate, but there is so much truth that I continually don't want to find again and again. I do. So to be a little bit hopeful, right? One of the things that I like about things like the Olympics, the World Cup, is the ways that they show that we can have positive things, right? When the Scottish show up in Boston and drink the city dry, there's an extent to which there are people who are like, oh yeah, that's, I appreciate the Scottish. That's great. When you look at, like, there's this guy that plays for Norway, whose name is Holland, and he is like a kindergartner. His like disposition, he's just out playing around on the field. He's having a great time. He doesn't really, as a matter of fact, he's openly said, like, oh, we're not going to win the World Cup. Like, that's outrageous. We're going to lose eventually. But he's just out there having a freaking blast the entire time that he plays. And people resonate with that so much. So there are some of those moments in these kind of international gatherings. I think there was a team that ended up, I think it was from Algeria or something like that, that ended up their home base was in Kansas, and these farmers like went out and like did an art installation of the Algerian flag in their farm fields, and was like, and those are those moments when I'm like, okay, maybe there's hope for humanity. Maybe there is something, because I see again and again on this regular basis the way that we need to hate each other in order to hold ourselves together. And so it's those moments, the life is endlessly ambiguous. Between those moments that show that we can transcend that and we can love each other and we can actually find relationships, and those moments where what we are held together by is our hatred of people. And these different motivations run throughout everything. And unfortunately, as human beings, we haven't been able to get away from the devils of our nature and run to the angels of our nature as much as we should. I wish we could.
Yeah. I was talking to this guy who does not understand why anyone watches the World Cup. And it was like one of those moments of like the most American thing to come out. He's like, soccer is the most boring sport. It's like watching paint dry. And no wonder we're not that good at it. You got real sports in America that are fun and you can watch them and people score and stuff.
Yeah.
Soccer is so boring. And all those other countries, they don't have any money. They got nothing to do. And so of course they're good at soccer. Have you been in any of those other places? The rest of the world is just so boring. And I was like, wow, where have you been to? Like, I mean, I've been to, I don't know, 9 or 10 countries and on purpose for vacation. And he's like, well, why would I ever want to go anywhere else? It was one of these things where you're just like looking around the room to be like, is anyone nodding with this? Because like I've lived in other countries. There's a lot of cool things to do elsewhere. But in his mind, he's just like, what? And why would we host this here?
Yeah, like, I always find this so ironic, especially given that the distinctively American sport is baseball. Like, have you you want to talk about a sport where nothing happens for long stretches?
Oh,
it's baseball.
Kevin.
But I do think
that this is one of those Chicago Cubs.
Yeah, but I do think this is one of those things that if it's our culture's boring sport, we're fine with it, right? If it's somebody else's culture's boring sport, oh my God, how can you put up with that? And it's just like, okay. Yeah.
Well, I love baseball, and it's an acquired taste. Like,
yeah.
You don't grow up, but if you do, and the same thing's true about soccer in my experience, because I didn't play soccer. Well, I played 1 year, didn't like it. And it wasn't until my kids were playing. Once you understand how the game goes, it's rather intense watching. Yeah. And you actually have to watch the whole game to get what's going on. In the same way, baseball, there are people that I'm just having a hot dog and beer. Or you're like, no, do you see how he's working the strike zone? Like every pitch is a battle. And like, if you know how to watch baseball,
no, exactly,
it's intense. And and if you don't, you're like, how many hot dogs and beers can I get in 9 innings? I'm going to do the 9 by 9.
But that's exactly it. I mean, like it's a part of a culture. And if you learn that culture, you're going to learn how to enjoy the game. Same thing with baseball, same thing with soccer. And I think that
apparently even cricket.
No, okay, I don't believe that.
No, I know.
There are limits. Yeah, no, how can you? I don't even think that game. I think they make that up as they go. They're just making up like language and like, oh, that was a sticky wicket and what I don't know. You just no, that's not a real thing.
That was a sticky wicket. Okay, Bo, I'm interested in exactly how many of the different things we've talked about today you're going to be able to get in the benediction.
Oh, I haven't even been thinking about the benediction. Oh,
because
no.
now you just added a sticky wicket option.
All right, hold on.
But
Oh,
Kevin,
no.
thank you so much for doing the joining us, doing the lecture and such. For everybody that's on here, if you go to theologysummit.com, you can sign up and you'll get sent the link to the page. It has a whole bunch of lectures from a bunch of our different friends, various from like history ones to looking at different parts of the church and changes to more looking at America's place and stuff in the world. So like it's there. And one of the goals of the summit, it really came from a lot of feedback from listeners, is like, what are we going to do right when summer's over in small groups, church groups, that kind of thing. Hopefully you can enjoy them and then pick the 3 or 4 that would provoke the best conversation in your congregation. And there's little discussion guides you can download and use if you want to use them for a group and such like that. But yeah,
all right,
it's been fun, and looking forward to Kevin's coming to camp this year too. So
oh yeah,
fun. All right, the benediction has a little bit of fly fishing, a little bit of sports ball, a little bit of politics. Okay, you ready?
Okay.
May your lines be tight. May your balls fly true. May your center hold. And I'll see you in Valhalla, brother.